Welcome to Integration Nation for Allison Sullivan's Integrative Mental Health Team. I'm Dee Daniels. Burnt waffles and bad attitudes. I'm so excited that we're doing this topic, and I would love to know where in the world you got the title of this episode from, because it's fabulous. I like it already.
I got the title for this episode from a deep and abiding love of waffles.
Yes.
I mean, waffles,
they're good,
are my thing. I am on a steady 5-year binge of weekend waffles. And I'm not exaggerating. You can ask my family for 5 years now on the weekend. If it's remotely possible, I will be having waffles. So I started thinking about how much I love waffles and what waffles mean to me in my life.
Of course you are thinking about it. Of course.
And let me just add in there, when I found out I had a wheat allergy, I had some waffle trauma.
Yes.
Because initially, back when I found out I had a wheat allergy, there were not all these cool gluten-free mixes and stuff like that. So my access to waffles was in jeopardy.
Yes.
I've worked through that. I'm on the other side. And so waffles are something I really look forward to. It's something that, I don't know, it's more than an indulgence. It's just like a warm hug of goodness. When I'm eating my weekend waffles, it's a full moment for me. And so I started thinking about what happens when the waffles burn. Mm. And it got me thinking about... Dun, dun, dun. It got me thinking about how we're all faced with burnt waffle moments in our lives.
Yes.
And how if we remain unaware of the burnt waffle moment, it turns into burnt waffles and bad attitudes.
Bad combo.
Yeah, it's not what we're looking for.
No.
So that's why I wanted to talk about it, because really at its essence, it's about letting waffles be waffles and figuring out how to not get so attached to the outcome of those waffles.
The whole attachment and non-attachment, and that's hard. It's hard for all of us. We all deal with it in so many different relationships that we have. We all experience it every day at work, at home. How to detach from something to let it be what it is can be scary and can have a lot of layers to it.
Yes, it's another reason that I include mindfulness and mindfulness-based practices as a cornerstone of how I define integrative mental health, because non-attachment is deeply transformational. And when I first encountered that word, I thought the same thing that you did. I thought, why would I ever want that? Because if I'm not attached to anything, how can I feel joy?
It feels like a lonely word.
It feels isolating. It feels disconnected. It feels gray. Mm-hmm. It feels kind of like, what the weather outside the window right now looks like. Side note, because of the weather this year, I really actually feel like I could live in Seattle. I used to be worried that I couldn't, but now I think I can.
Oh no, you've gotten the training to do it here.
I think I could do it
this season. Absolutely.
So it's another way I'm now not attached to some thinking I used to have. But back to my definition of that and what my concerns were, I didn't want anything to do with it because I thought it meant all of that. But what I have come to believe both in practice and in my personal life is that really is the portal for spontaneous joy and for connectedness with people, because my expectations interrupts the connection with other people, and that starts with waffles. If I've decided I need these waffles to be perfectly golden brown to start my weekend off the way I want my weekend, and then something happens with that, then all of a sudden, that has a snowball effect of, see, one small thing, all I wanted was waffles, and I can't even have that. Mm-hmm. Then what that does is, based on how our brain functions, is that starts to filter information that I'm receiving for the rest of the day. I'll start to filter information to support that faulty premise of, bad things happen to me or I don't deserve. And then that just takes on a life of its own. And pretty soon, everything around me feels awful, in part because that's all I've allowed myself to attach to.
So I love this thought about, because the waffle scenario really does put it into perspective that we can see it. But, I'm thinking about, you've started your day off, your weekend off, expecting it to go this way, fill in the blank, whatever you want it to be.
Right.
But we'll use waffles as the example.
Right.
You expect, my expectation is going in saying, I want the waffles to be just fluffy, golden, perfectly golden brown, not too brown, not
Yes,
not,
yes.
Not too this, not, too much of this, not too much of that. And if it's not right on that,
Yes.
your whole intro to the weekend, possibly your whole day, is now ruined, or that's how you set up that tone. How do you then detach from that? How do you say, okay, I don't want the whole day to start like that. I don't want the weekend to start like that. So how do I reform my thinking around that expectation that I had?
Well, you can start by noticing that if you're putting all of that, if I'm putting all of that on my poor little waffle,
right,
I need to take notice of those expectations. What is going on with me that I have now decided I need this waffle to be this specific way for me to be okay.
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden I've given the waffle, this thing outside of me that I can't control, all this power over my okayness. And that's where the trouble starts. As soon as I say, I like eating waffles, it's great, and I'm looking forward to other things on my day, that's different. That's more of a right-sized relationship with waffles. That's understanding that I'm actually in the driver's seat of my day, not the waffle. The waffle is not creating the foundation for my good day. And although it seems silly to think about a waffle in that way, we can substitute waffle for relationship, for job, for car, for so many things that we do get stuck in that expectation, negativity bias trap.
I'm thinking about, speaking of using that for anything, which you fill in the blank, I'm thinking about Eckhart Tolle and some of the things that he'll say about non-attachment. And even in my own relationship, as much as scary as it is to think about not being attached to your significant other, there's also so much joy in that. There's so much beauty in that, because you're just letting the other person be and not bringing your expectations to the table.
Yeah, it starts to get so scary when we start to have really deep feelings for people, because then we start to be at risk for telling ourselves that those deep feelings are the source of our security. Then once we have put security on the menu and attached it to another person, then we're going to start putting all kinds of expectations and agendas on their behavior. And that just disconnects us. But when we realize that we are the source of our security, and this person that we have these deep feelings about, towards, with, magnifies that, doesn't create that, isn't the cause of it, but magnifies that, then that helps us stay within ourselves in a more non-attached way so that we can actually see who they are and celebrate who they are. And when we do that, then that actually builds the intimacy. But it's really risky.
It's very risky. And it's actually, at least in my experience, it can be the birthplace of spontaneous things happening. Really spontaneous, letting something be as it is and not attaching to the outcome.
I've come to believe that it really is the foundation of long-lasting, healthy relationships, whether they're romantic relationships, parent-child relationships, friend relationships, business relationships. Non-attachment is the foundation of those being healthy and successful, because as soon as we start deciding who somebody has to be and what they have to do because that's what we need, we just can't have a long-term healthy relationship, because we're going to start manipulating, we're going to start doing all kinds of shady stuff to get what we think we need, and you can't have a healthy relationship from that place.
You talked about at the beginning getting into a snowball in this cycle. How do we break that cycle if we feel it coming on? If we didn't even know we were doing that, not consciously aware of doing it, as we get into our day or our week, or as we go into work, or as we come home and deal with our, after work scenario, and you're not saying the greatest things to your significant other, or you expected it to go a certain way. How do we get out of that snowball, that cycle, and stop ourselves and say, okay, let's go in a different direction here?
Well, I always encourage people to do little benign experiments with themselves about focus and attention. And so maybe what that looks like is, start thinking about the color red, and start really holding the color red and images of red things in your mind. And then as you go through your day, see how often you're noticing red things. You're gonna really find that you're noticing red things all around you in really unexpected places. And so when people start to do those own experiments in their lives, they start to get buy-in to this concept, because the concept is real. So once they understand that where their attention and energy with that attention, what that creates, then they will listen more to the ways out of that, because they'll understand, oh, yes, I remember, because as soon as I started focusing on black cars, that's all I saw. As soon as I started focusing on, purple, that's all I saw. As soon as I started focusing on coins, that's all I saw. So then once people have that buy-in, then I start encouraging them to notice what they're giving their energy to, and to notice their thinking about that, because it's most powerful when we notice not only what we're thinking, but the intense feelings that back up that thinking, because that's what really starts the snowball effect. So when people can begin to notice that, then they can interrupt that pattern. They can shift their attention, and they can shift the energy behind whatever they're giving attention to. And I tell people to start with a gratitude practice, because that's just a really great way to open people back up again.
That's a great way to shift quickly.
Really quickly. Especially you can do it with yourself. You can do it with a situation. You can do it with a person. You can really start to say, oh, okay, well, I'm actually grateful for this person in my life because of this, because of this, because of this. And then suddenly that puts you in a more non-attached way, or I'm grateful that I have this going on, or I'm grateful that I have this going on. Then suddenly you're out of that loop, whatever you were in that was a negative snowball for you, and you're back, in a more neutral starting place. And then once people are there, it's about reminding themselves, where is my source of security? And that's always about inside. It's always inside out, not outside in. But I think many people have that 180. I think many people think, if I get the outside to look right, the inside is going to feel right. But it's really when I'm right on the inside, the outside, whatever that looks like, is going to reflect the inner grounded balance.
I think when you started in this whole line of interrupting this snowball, I think everyone's ears were like, yes. We all get that's a train that can start going very fast.
Me too, yeah.
And can start feeling very overwhelming.
Yes.
And even lead to like panic attacks and things of that nature.
Yes. And if people are so wrapped up in it that they can't use a gratitude practice to unbreak it, then I recommend people just connect to their breath. Just take 1 minute and breathe in and breathe out. And just really focus your attention like we did in the mindfulness episode, because that's a really powerful reset. Another thing that I teach clients to do that I think we talked about is the 5 senses grounding technique.
Yes.
Because that interrupts the process. And that's the first order of business, is we need to interrupt that process so we can get back up in our wise mind, this the front part of our mind, which helps us to evaluate and make decisions and do all the other stuff we need to do. But we've got to get out of that fear train.
When you're talking about, interrupting this process and checking in with the senses and things of that nature, that reminds me a lot of, if you've never done a meditation practice at all, if you've never tried meditation, that can teach you so many things in that interruption, teach you how to interrupt, because there are so many things even just about your breath that you can focus on that will bring that circling of your mind, that franticness feeling that will bring it down and ground it in a way that you're just thinking about your breath going into your body, coming out of your body, what that feels like, what that looks like. That can be really transforming and powerful.
It's super transforming. And then what it's also doing that we're unaware of is that it's changing our brain in measurable ways, so that over time, we have a calmer wavelength, if you will, in our brain, and a more connected to ourself wavelength, and that matters. So, I tell people, we're in the middle of another meditation workshop now, and I tell people all the time, I love doing the beginner meditation class because I love that aha moment that people start to have when they start to incorporate different kinds of meditation in their daily life, and they start to get space around their thoughts, and they're not as attached to their thoughts. They're not as attached to their body sensations. They're not as attached to their feelings. They start to understand that whether they pay attention to their thoughts or their sensations or their feelings or not, those things move on without attention. And once people really understand that, then they become way less attached to them. And then you can really experience, the unexpected joy of that perfect bite of waffle, whether it's burnt on the edges or not, because it's about the whole experience. And it's about you in the experience. It's not about this thing outside of you has to be a certain way for you to be okay.
So the waffles, let's have this scenario. So the waffles are burnt, and we're upset about it, and it causes this initial bad attitude moment where we could carry that into the rest of the day. Now, we want to change that. We want to turn that around. Does this also somewhere fit into the spectrum of feeling you feel like a victim of these circumstances? And maybe some people can identify with, sometimes I just feel like every weekend I'm having a bad waffle experience.
Then what I tell people is we need to start looking at how much pressure and expectation you're putting on the waffles. And sometimes people have to, because they have so much energy built up in this negativity bias and this habit of expectation, we have to dig really, really deep to find things that are okay, to find things that are exceptions to the rule, to find things to be grateful for. Like, okay, were you able to walk to the waffle maker?
Right.
Then that's a starting place. You were able to walk to the waffle maker. Do you have a waffle maker?
Even better.
Then that's a starting place. That starts to get some room around it. And then once people have a little bit of room around an issue they feel super stuck in, then that's oftentimes all it takes for the pattern to begin to be broken.
You bring up a really good point about feeling stuck, and I think that's a common thing that we can get into sometimes, of feeling stuck in a moment, feeling stuck in a year, feeling stuck in a certain time frame in your life journey. That feeling stuck process, if I may use another waffle description, can feel like you're wading in the maple syrup, and it's very heavy and you can't get out. And
yes.
So how do you've got to get that, once you get that initial moment of getting out, you don't want to keep going back to that and falling into that.
No, you don't want to keep going back to that. So, to extend the analogy, what I would say then is it's time to maybe consider some other breakfast options.
Oh, I love it.
Because we can start to think that that's the only thing we can have.
The only thing that comforts us.
It's the only possible thing until we start to say, oh, wait a minute, actually, I could have pancakes. Oh, actually, I could make an omelet. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, I could make a yogurt fruit parfait, on and on and on. Then we're automatically opening up the plane of possibility. That's a phrase from Dan Siegel, who's done amazing work on interpersonal neurobiology. We're in the plane of possibility then. And that reminds us that it's our own rigid thinking that is the issue, not the situation. It's that we've forgotten that there are other alternatives because we've just stayed so entrenched in this thing that isn't working. And then what that does is that reminds us that things are supposed to change.
Yes.
Things are supposed to be fluid. They're supposed to be dynamic. And when we can remember that, then we start to feel safer in general, because no relationship stays the same from day one on. No situation stays the same from day one on. It's different all the time. And so when we can do that, we can let go of having waffles every weekend for breakfast, and we can introduce new things on the menu, or we could even decide to go out to breakfast.
Ooh.
Right.
Talk about stepping outside the comfort zone.
Yes.
And that's interesting though, because really, when you hear it a lot and you see it on memes and you see it on Instagram pop up and people talking about it, and I believe it's true, but I think it can be overused. But you hear it a lot where it's like, there's a lot of joy on the other side of this uncomfortable step that you're taking.
So much joy, I think, in large part because we get right-sized again. It doesn't feel good when we are putting expectations and agendas on other people, because I think we have a deep wisdom within us that tells us that that's not real. And when we, rigidly expect things to remain the same, it's the same thing. I think we know that that's just not possible. And so when we open up to allow for other outcomes, other possibilities, to not know, to not have to have things a certain way to be okay, then there's joy everywhere. And then we start taking ourselves less seriously, and that becomes self-sustaining because it feels so good. Like you said, it feels so good. And that's the opposite, if you will, of that negativity bias snowball. We want more of what feels good, so we're going to do that time and time again. And if we can create a supportive structure around us of people to remind us about that, then that helps us when we inevitably stumble, because we're going to stumble.
I was thinking around, and this reminds me so much of what happened to me. I was thinking around the election day and how wonderful it feels to go and vote, and that process and how good that feels. And I thought to myself, when I was done filling out my ballot, I wanted to turn around and get a high five from someone, this was great. And this was a great moment. And those people around you, when you're taking those uncomfortable steps, or when you're doing something that, you're feeling is a proud moment or whatever, if you can have some high fives around you in that moment.
Yes. If you can have some high fives around you, and if you can high five yourself. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because actually, I think it was my husband in his former job. They used to have these team meetings every Thursday where they would go over every project that the whole team was doing. And they actually instituted, when somebody did something really well, they would high five themselves, and they would actually do it where they would actually put their hands above their head and clap their hands together as if they were high fiving themselves.
Yes.
And I thought that was such a great way to remind themselves, and for me to remind myself that it's important I do that for me first.
Yes.
The other stuff is supportive and we absolutely need it, but I need to recognize it too. I need to high five myself and then find some other people around me that are going to high five me.
Yes, and for instance, when I have a great moment and I'm high fiving myself, I sometimes it's the silliest things, but whatever feels really good to you in that moment. Sometimes I will, just walk by the mirror and say something like, "You go, girl.
Yes,
that was awesome."
Yes.
That's so important, that validating moment, and there's a lot of security in that, which can also lead to you not needing that from the outside source, so you can have that non-attachment moment that can feel so good.
It's fundamental to allow those non-attachment moments that feel so good, because we have to honor ourselves, and then that helps us continue to stay secure. And then when we're kind of off base and we're losing our focus and we're forgetting that a little bit, we can remind ourselves, oh, wait a minute, that felt really good when I did that the last time. Let me do it again. And then it becomes reinforcing in that way.
Replacing the bad cycle habits with these great habits.
Yes, exactly, because it's the same principle that works both ways. What fires together wires together. What tends to fire together is the stuff that we have strong feelings about. So that whether that's strong negative feelings or strong positive feelings, there's connections being made. And so the more that we feed those things that give us positive feelings, then the more we're going to look for that. And I know that may seem confusing, that on one hand I'm saying non-attachment, and the other hand I'm saying, well, look for things that you feel strongly about. But we can have really strong feelings about something and still not attached to an outcome. That's the whole point. We can feel really good about beliefs and opportunities and possibilities without attaching to an outcome. And if you want to take your voting example, what feels good about that is that you're exercising your right.
Yes.
You are exercising your right, and that's something you have complete control over. So that's what I'm talking about. We can feel great about that, but as soon as we say, so that means I have to have this outcome, then we've set ourselves up to derail the whole opportunity for joy.
Burnt waffles and bad attitudes. I'm hungry. I'm grateful, and I'm going to give you a high five because this was great.
High five! Woo!
Yes. Allison Sullivan and Associates Integrative Mental Health Team is located in beautiful, historic downtown Fredericksburg, Virginia, and at allisonsintegrativehealth.org. New and exciting workshops are available to you that will give you personal attention to meet your needs right where you are on your journey. Sign up for our newsletter to be the first to know when registration opens for workshops like Aromatherapy 101. Here's how you can discover to use aromatherapy to support your health. Did you know that a blend of frankincense, peppermint, and lemongrass supports wisdom, optimism, and it will help you release unhealthy attachments? This is where you can learn how to support your mental, emotional, and physical health with the Essential Oils workshops available to you monthly for no charge. Come meet the team. Schedule your session today for psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, yoga, and massage, and begin restoring yourself in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to call, the number is 540-907-0991 and online at allisonsintegrativehealth.org. As Allison always says, self-care will save your life. Let go and lean in.